The tennis ball in my right hand had lost its yellow color years ago. Mud and weather had worked into the fuzz until it looked more gray than gold, and when I closed my fingers around it, the ball smelled faintly of wet earth and cedar. Cooper sat on my welcome mat as if the porch had been built for him. His tail struck the floorboards once, then again, slow, confident, almost ceremonial. He had crossed the property line, past my empty flower bed, climbed 3 steps, and made himself comfortable beside the front door. The detail that did not belong was the woman at the bottom of the stairs. Tessa Thomas held a blue nylon leash in both hands. Her knuckles had gone pale around the handle. She was wearing a light blue floral dress that made no sense for the storm-heavy afternoon, and a strand of blonde hair kept sticking to her cheek in the humidity. We had lived next door to each other for 6 months. In that time, we had exchanged polite nods, one package by mistake, and nothing that could be called a conversation. Now she looked at me as though crossing the lawn had cost her more than the walk back would. "I'm sorry," she said. The words came out thin. He slipped his collar again. Cooper lifted his head, pleased to hear himself mentioned, then rested his chin on the mat. I stayed where I was. In the field, sudden movement could turn a frightened animal into a vanishing point. He seems to like the shade. Tessa's eyes moved from the dog to the front door, then to the cracked terracotta pot sitting beside it. The pot had been empty for so long that rain had darkened the inside, and a thin green weed had rooted in one of the drainage holes. She looked away before I could tell whether she had noticed it. "My landlord left a formal warning this morning," she said. Her fingers tightened around the leash. "If Cooper is found off-leash in the neighborhood one more time, Harris says he'll begin eviction proceedings." That was the first clear edge of the trap. The dog was the visible part. Harris had the lease, the notice, and the power to turn one loose collar into a reason for Tessa to lose her home. "Does he know how Cooper gets out?" I asked. "I've checked the fence 3 times, but," her gaze flicked toward her house. "He says that doesn't matter. He says the lease makes me responsible for every complaint, whether the dog is mine or not." I had heard Harris before. Late-night car doors, a hard voice carrying across the yards, the sound of someone who expected the world to answer on his schedule. Tessa swallowed. "I know you work outdoors. I see the gear in your truck. You track animals. I thought maybe you could tell me what I'm missing." She had crossed the invisible boundary between our properties and asked a near stranger to enter a problem she had been trying to manage alone. The request was practical. The cost of making it was not. I tossed the ball. Cooper caught it, trotted down the steps, and dropped it at Tessa's feet. She looked at him, then at me. "Let's walk the fence," I said. Her shoulders lowered a fraction. She did not say thank you. I did not need her to. Her backyard was neat enough to look untouched. The azalea bushes along the fence were thick and green. The boards were intact. Nothing suggested an opening large enough for a golden retriever. I crouched where the grass met the dirt. A few leaves had been turned over. The lower branches of a rhododendron were polished smooth in one direction, not broken, but rubbed by a repeated passage. Beyond the bush, a service gate leaned against its catch. "The gate," Tessa said. "It closes," I answered. "It doesn't lock." The latch was rusted and bent just enough to miss the strike plate when the gate shifted. Cooper would jump, hit it with his paws, and push through. Wind or gravity would swing it closed afterward. Tessa pressed her thumb against the metal. "I put that in writing 2 months ago. Harris said it wasn't a priority. It is now." "I can pay you." She turned toward the back door. "I have cash inside, or I can send it." "I'm fixing a gate so your dog doesn't meet a car." I kept my voice even. "That's the whole arrangement." The truck sat in my driveway, in its steel bed box, beside camera batteries and weatherproof field notebooks. I kept a cordless drill, impact bits, and spare hardware for securing equipment in rough country. I brought back a slide bolt latch and a plate of galvanized screws. When I returned, Tessa had placed a metal bowl of water beside the bush. A second glass waited on her patio table. Condensation gathered along its side and slid down into a dark ring on the wood. She did not point it out. I did not thank her for it. The gesture sat between us without asking to be named. The old screws came out in short, sharp bursts. I aligned the new plate, held it flush, and drove the long screws into the cedar until the hardware stopped shifting under my hand. I tested the slide twice. The bolt entered the plate with a clean metallic click. Cooper watched from the grass. When I pushed the gate, he ignored it and dropped a slobber-dark rope toy onto my boots. "Your timing is excellent," I told him. Tessa made a sound that almost became a laugh. She looked surprised by it. For the next 2 weeks, the gate held. Cooper stayed inside his yard. But the pressure on Tessa did not ease. Every morning, she rattled the new bolt twice before letting the dog out. On rainy days, she checked it 3 times. Her car stayed in the same spot from Friday evening until Monday morning. No friends came by. No music crossed the fence. The house began to look less like a home and more like a place she was defending. I kept my distance. Most evenings, I sat on my porch cleaning lenses or sorting memory cards. The cracked terracotta pot became a place for my lens caps. It was useless, ugly, and too solid to throw away. When the porch light came on across the lawn, Tessa often glanced at it before going inside. One Tuesday, she carried a cardboard file box to my steps. She wore jeans and a faded gray sweatshirt. The box was heavy enough that she set it down with both hands. Envelopes, shipping manifests, printed design proofs, and return labels pushed against the open top. "Harris sent another email," she said. I placed my lens cap in the terracotta pot. "What does he want now?" "A property audit." She stared at the box. "He says I'm operating a commercial business out of the house because clients send physical mock-ups here. He wants every delivery logged and justified. If he decides I'm using the property for something other than residential purposes, he can issue another notice." The dog excuse had failed. Harris had moved to paperwork, where confusion could be made to look like evidence. Tessa rubbed the corner of an envelope until it bent. "My lease says residential use only. My design work is remote. These are reference materials and client samples, not inventory. But I don't know how to organize them without making the pile look worse." She lifted her eyes to mine. "You documented the gate. You knew which part mattered. Are you good with systems?" "I'm good with patterns." I moved a second chair beside the first. She carried the box onto the porch. "We started with the delivery labels. I built columns for date, sender, tracking number, contents, intended use, and final location." Tessa searched her email for matching client messages while I entered the numbers into the field laptop I used to catalog camera traps and wildlife sightings. The work had a rhythm. She opened envelopes. I read dates aloud. She found the corresponding project file. I marked the row complete. Whenever a package had gone back to a client, she wrote the return date in the margin with a red pen. "You don't type like a man who lives in the woods," she said after an hour. "The woods have paperwork." "Do the trees send invoices?" "Only the expensive ones." Her laugh came quietly, but it stayed longer this time. At dusk, she brought 2 pastries from the bakery near the main road. One was an almond twist, the other was a cinnamon roll with the center pulled slightly loose. "The cashier said the cinnamon one was the last," she said. A dangerous level of influence. I used my powers responsibly. We ate over the spreadsheets. Sugar dusted the corner of her laptop. She brushed it away with the back of her hand, then looked at the tiny white mark on her knuckle as though it were a new piece of evidence. By midnight, we had a dated delivery log, a 3-page explanation of her work, copies of her 1099 classifications, and a folder of project emails showing that each package belonged to an existing design job. The package records did not prove every legal question. They did prove that Harris's description of her house as a warehouse was inaccurate. "This is not legal advice," I said, sliding the printout toward her. "It's an organized record of what happened." Tessa read the first page. Her thumb stopped moving against the edge. "That's more than I had this morning." "I'll print 2 copies tomorrow," I said. "One for you and one for certified mail." "Thank you, Grant. You can thank me by not letting Cooper eat the documents." Cooper opened one eye from the porch mat and closed it again. 2 days later, Harris arrived without a clipboard. His white sedan stopped in front of Tessa's house. He crossed the lawn quickly and pounded on her door. I was loading a weather-sealed camera case into my truck. The case remained open beside me. Tessa answered with the printed report in her hand. I could not hear every word, but Harris's voice carried. He pointed toward the paper, then toward the house. Tessa held her ground on the threshold. When he swatted the report from her hand, the pages scattered across the porch. Harris stepped over the threshold line. I dropped the truck's tailgate. The metal crash turned his head. I stayed beside the truck, hands loose at my sides, far enough away not to take over and close enough to be seen. Tessa looked at me. Her eyes asked a question without giving me the answer. "Do you want me to come over?" I called. "Or do you want me to stay here as a witness?" She glanced at Harris, then back at me. "Stay where he can see you." So I stayed. Harris said something I could not make out. Tessa bent to gather the pages. He retreated to the walkway, still talking, then returned to his car. Only after the sedan disappeared did I cross the lawn. Tessa was kneeling on the porch, aligning the pages by their corners. Her hands shook so hard that the stack kept slipping apart. "What did he give you?" I asked. "A 30-day notice to vacate." She pressed one page flat with her palm. "Disruptive behavior. Repeated noise complaints. He says Cooper barks all night." "Does he have a written complaint record?" "He says the neighbors told him." "Did they?" "No." Her answer came too quickly. She folded the notice once, then unfolded it. The crease landed through the word vacate. "I can't keep doing this," she said. I sat on the step below her, leaving the papers in her hands. "We don't have to decide everything tonight." "He has already decided." "Then we document the decision." She looked toward the house. The porch light reflected in the front window, bright against the dark interior. "I can't lose this place." "Because it's yours?" Her mouth opened. No answer came. She folded the notice again, this time along the edge of the paper. The question stayed between us. I did not ask it again. The next morning, Tessa called a local tenant rights attorney whose number was printed on the county housing resource page. Her name was Mara Chen. Tessa made the call at her own kitchen table while I sat on the porch with Cooper. Mara reviewed the lease, the gate emails, the delivery audit request, and the 30-day notice. She did not promise a victory. She did not call Harris a criminal. She explained that the validity of a notice depended on local rules, the lease language, the timing of the complaints, and what Harris could actually prove. "Keep every message," Mara said through the speaker. "Ask for the complaint dates and copies of any records he intends to rely on. Don't confront him alone. If he files, we respond through the proper process. If he is willing to withdraw the notice and end the lease by agreement, make sure the terms are written down." Tessa wrote each instruction on a yellow legal pad. "What about the gate?" she asked. "Keep the repair date, the photographs, and the email showing you reported the defect before the notice. Those facts may matter." When the call ended, Tessa looked at the pad. Her breathing had steadied, but her thumb had left a dark crescent of ink along the side of her hand. "You were right," she said. "About what?" "This isn't a conversation. It's a trail." She placed the legal pad beside the terracotta pot on my porch. The wind lifted the corner of the first page. I set a lens cap on it until she closed the cover. Over the next 3 days, we gathered facts without turning the neighborhood into a courtroom. I photographed the repaired latch from 3 angles, including the date stamp from the camera. Tessa exported the email in which she had reported the defect 2 months earlier. Mara sent her a checklist for preserving the original files and forwarding copies without altering the metadata. The retired couple 2 houses down had never heard Cooper barking at night. Mrs. Gable brought out a small spiral notebook in which she recorded the dates Harris had parked outside Tessa's house. "I started writing them down because he made me nervous," she said. "Then I thought being nervous was not a reason to forget what I had seen." She signed a dated statement and asked Mara where to send it. Her husband added the exact time of the one late-night visit he had witnessed. The young family across the street provided the same kind of statement. No one exaggerated. No one promised to destroy Harris. They wrote what they had personally observed. That distinction mattered. The lawyer who worked with Harris requested a meeting on Tessa's porch the following Thursday. Mara could not attend in person, but she sent Tessa a written authorization allowing her to share the relevant documents and told her to end the meeting if it became threatening. Tessa read the message twice. "I want you there," she said to me. "As a witness." "As my witness, not my spokesman." "Then I'll sit where you choose." She pointed to the wicker chair beside the railing. The cracked terracotta pot sat between us with 3 lens caps inside it. Harris appeared with his attorney, a narrow man named Mr. Bell who carried a leather briefcase and a tired expression. Tessa stood in the doorway. "What is he doing here?" Harris asked. "He is my witness," she said. She did not look at me for permission. Mr. Bell opened his briefcase. "Ms. Thomas, we are prepared to discuss termination of the lease based on repeated nuisance complaints and unauthorized commercial use." "Before we discuss terms," Tessa said, "I want the complaint dates, the names of the complaining parties, and copies of any records you intend to rely on. My attorney advised me to request them." Harris's face changed before Mr. Bell's did. The lawyer looked at Tessa, then at the folder in her hands. "You have counsel." "Tenant counsel," she answered. "She is reviewing every document." I kept my hands on my knees. The folder was not mine. Tessa had arranged the contents in the order Mara recommended: the lease, the notice, the gate email, dated photographs, the delivery log, Mrs. Gable's statement, and the other neighbors' statements. "May I see what you have?" Mr. Bell asked. Tessa looked at me then, not for rescue, for confirmation that the folder was ready. I nodded once. She handed it to him. He read silently. His finger stopped at the gate email. He looked at the photographs, then at the date of the first notice. He read the delivery log and the statements without rushing. "Mr. Harris," he said, "the timing creates a problem. She has complaints. You have assertions. The file in front of me contains no incident reports, no code citations, and no signed neighbor complaints. It does contain an unresolved repair request followed by multiple notices." He turned to Tessa. "I'm not making a legal finding here. I am telling you that I cannot responsibly certify the factual basis of the notice as it stands." The sentence was not dramatic. It was better than dramatic. It was a professional refusing to carry a weak record forward. Harris reached for the folder. Tessa held it against her side. "We can withdraw the 30-day notice," Mr. Bell said. "If Ms. Thomas wants to remain, we will need a written addendum clarifying the residential use provision and the pet access repair. If she prefers to leave, we can discuss a mutual termination without a lease break penalty." Tessa did not answer immediately. Her eyes moved across the yard. Cooper sat beneath the table. Mrs. Gable stood across the street with one hand around her envelope. The gate behind the house remained closed, its new bolt catching a narrow line of light. "I want the notice withdrawn in writing," Tessa said. "I want my deposit protected, and I want a mutual termination option if I choose to leave. No retaliation language, no admission that the notice was valid." Mr. Bell took out a notebook. Harris stared at her. "You're making this difficult." "It was difficult before I asked for the records." Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. "Mr. Bell wrote down the terms. He said he would send a draft within 2 business days for Mara to review." Harris started to object, but the lawyer lifted one hand. "You hired me to protect your position," he said. "That requires a record we can defend." The meeting ended without a victory speech. Harris left with his jaw set. Mr. Bell paused at the bottom of the steps. "The organization of this file was effective," he said to Tessa. Then he looked at me. "And the dated photographs were correctly preserved. Whoever showed you how to keep the chain intact understood the value of a clean record." "He did," Tessa said. "But I built the file." Mr. Bell gave her a small nod. "That distinction will help you." Mrs. Gable crossed the street after the cars were gone. She handed Tessa the original statement in its envelope. "I used to think staying quiet kept a neighborhood peaceful," she said. "Today I learned that sometimes a dated sentence does more." Tessa accepted the envelope with both hands. "Thank you for writing what you saw. Thank you for giving me something accurate to sign." By Friday afternoon, Mara approved the written withdrawal. Harris's notice was rescinded. The addendum clarified that Tessa's remote design work and ordinary delivery of client materials did not, by themselves, change the residential use of the property. A mutual termination clause was added with a clear move-out date, deposit terms, and no admission of wrongdoing by either side. Tessa read the document at my kitchen counter. She initialed each page, signed at the bottom, and emailed it to Mara before sending anything to Harris. She chose to leave. "I don't want to spend another year checking that bolt every morning," she said. "Where do you want to go?" She glanced toward the window. My house stood next door, its porch light already on even though the sun had not gone down. "I'm not sure yet." "That's different from having no options." Her mouth curved. "You're very annoying when you're technically correct." "It's one of my more reliable qualities." The storm arrived that night. Rain struck the windows in hard sheets. Wind pushed water under the back door. Cooper disliked thunder, but usually hid under Tessa's bed until the worst passed. When lightning cracked over the neighborhood, she opened the door to call him inside. The screen tore as he bolted through it. Her call reached me before the second thunderclap. "Grant," she said, "Cooper's gone." I was already reaching for my field jacket. "What direction?" "Back gate, toward the drainage path." "Do you want me to come over?" "Yes." I took the mag light, spare batteries, gloves, and a coil of reflective cord. Tessa stood on her porch in the rain, soaked hair pressed to her face, one hand wrapped around the broken screen. I held the umbrella over her before opening the yard map on my phone. "We don't chase him," I said. "We read where he would choose shelter." The words returned from the first afternoon, but the meaning had changed. Then, I had been asking Tessa to let me study a problem without crowding her. Now, she was standing beside me in the dark, ready to move through it with me. "He'll avoid the road," she said. "He hates headlights. He'll follow the low ground. And he likes the smell of the bakery's trash bins." I looked at her. "That is useful information. I have been living with him for 5 years. I know his bad decisions." We moved together. The rain erased the obvious tracks, so I looked for disturbed grass beneath the hedge, a snapped stem with fresh sap, and a dark smear on the mud where a paw had slid. Tessa held the flashlight at an angle while I marked each point with reflective cord. At the corner of the drainage path, she stopped. "There." The beam caught a wet strand of golden fur on a thorn branch. Beyond it, the concrete pipe disappeared beneath brambles. Cooper whined from inside. Tessa took one step forward. I raised my hand, not to stop her, but to slow the movement. "The thorns are thick. Do you want to call him from here while I check the opening, or do you want to go in with me?" Her fingers tightened around the flashlight. "Check the opening. I'll keep talking to him. If I need to reach farther, I'll tell you first." She nodded. "Okay." Tessa crouched near the pipe. "Coop!" she called. Her voice shook once, then steadied. "You're safe. Follow my voice." I lay on the wet ground where she could see me and pushed the maglite beam along the concrete. Cooper had wedged himself against the far wall, frightened but uninjured. The pipe narrowed around him. "He's caught on a root," I said. "I can reach his shoulder." "Do it slowly." I put on the gloves and extended one arm. My fingers touched wet fur. Cooper flinched. I stopped, waited, and let him hear Tessa's voice. "Good," she whispered. "That's it. Stay with us." The dog shifted half an inch. I followed the movement instead of pulling against it. When the root loosened, I slid my hand beneath his chest and gave him a stable surface to push against. "Now," I said. Tessa reached into the opening and took hold of his collar. Together, we guided him backward. No tugging, no panic. One breath, 1 inch, another breath. Cooper came free in a rush of mud and rain. He landed in Tessa's arms and immediately buried his face against her shoulder. She dropped to her knees, wrapping both arms around his neck. Her body shook with relief, but she did not make a sound. I turned the flashlight toward the path and gave them the privacy of the moment. When she stood, Cooper pressed against her leg. His leash was gone, his fur was filthy, and he looked offended by the entire night. "He is going to expect an apology," I said. Tessa wiped rain from her cheek. "He is the victim. He broke a screen door. A victim with complicated choices." The laugh that escaped her was small and unsteady, but it survived the storm. "We brought Cooper home and dried him with 3 towels. Tessa found an old blanket. I made tea neither of us drank." The broken screen waited in the doorway, and the rain tapped the glass beside the cracked terracotta pot. After the dog settled beneath the kitchen table, Tessa stood at the counter with both hands around the mug. "I thought you were going to tell me to give up," she said. "About Harris?" "About everything." I waited. She looked toward the hallway. "When I was younger, I lost a place because someone else decided I was too difficult to keep around. I didn't have the money to challenge it. I packed in one night. I promised myself I would never be that helpless again. That was all she gave me. It was enough. The fear had not begun with Cooper or Harris or the broken latch. The house had become the place where she had tried to prove that one bad decision by another person could not take everything from her again. "You weren't helpless tonight," I said. Her eyes lifted. I was still afraid. "Those are not the same thing." She looked down at the tea. A thin ring of water marked the counter beneath the mug. "I'm not surrendering," she said. The words were so quiet that I almost mistook them for the beginning of another explanation. She set the mug down. "Her dog kept running into my yard. She came over and asked, 'Can my dog and I just move in?'" The title of the question landed between us, warm and frightening in equal measure. I did not reach for her. "Are you asking because you need a roof tonight, or because you want to build something with me?" Tessa held my gaze. "Both can be true," she said. "But I'm asking because I want to choose the second one." The rain softened against the window. "Then we make a plan," I said. "Separate workspaces, your name on the agreement, Cooper's training schedule, a move-in date after Mara reviews the paperwork. You keep your own keys." "You have a training schedule for my dog?" "I have a list." "Of course you do." "The first rule is no unauthorized yard excursions." Cooper sighed beneath the table. Tessa smiled at him, then at me. "He is not signing anything without representation." The next morning, before either of us carried a box, Tessa met Mara at the library. They reviewed the mutual termination agreement, the deposit release, and the occupancy paperwork for my house. Tessa signed only after confirming that she could leave if the arrangement stopped feeling safe. She kept the old house through the agreed move-out date. She returned the keys in person and received a written receipt for the deposit. Harris did not apologize. He did not need to for the record to close. The signed documents gave Tessa what his voice had never offered, an ending that could not be rewritten after the fact. Mrs. Gable helped with the last boxes. She brought sandwiches wrapped in wax paper and labeled each one with a black marker. Grant, Tessa, and Cooper were written on 3 of them. "You labeled mine," I said. "You have a habit of eating the wrong one." "That happened once." It happened twice. Tessa carried the final box from the living room. "What was in the first sandwich?" "A pastry." "That was not a sandwich." "It was in a sandwich bag." "Mrs. Gable shook her head. "This is why people need witnesses." Tessa's desk went into the spare room, where the afternoon light was good for color work. My camera equipment stayed in the locked storage room. The boundary between our workspaces was clear. The kitchen remained shared territory, which meant Cooper eventually learned that a loaf of bread was not a personal invitation. 3 weeks later, Harris mailed a final accounting of the deposit. The numbers matched the written agreement. Mara checked it. Tessa filed the receipt in the same folder as the gate photographs. The folder stayed in a drawer. She did not open it every morning. Instead, she opened the curtains. 6 months after the storm, the neighborhood held its spring garden walk. Mrs. Gable had organized it after discovering that 3 separate households had been growing herbs in identical cracked pots. Tessa stood beside the folding table at the end of our street, wearing a pale green cardigan over a simple dress. Cooper sat at her feet with a new leash clipped to a harness he disliked but tolerated. On the table were printed cards for the neighborhood's shared design and repair fund. Tessa had created the layout. The first donation would pay for small safety repairs before they became expensive arguments. Harris was not there. His property company had assigned a new manager, and the old complaints had stopped arriving. Mrs. Gable had brought copies of the signed statements to the neighborhood association, not to create gossip but to establish a repair policy. Written requests would receive a written response. Tessa had asked me to stand beside her while she explained the plan. When a neighbor asked how the fund had started, she looked at me. "It started with a gate," she said. "Then it became a way for people to keep a problem from being hidden until someone was threatened by it." Her hand found mine in full view of the table, the neighbors, and the dog who had caused the first conversation. And this is Grant," she continued. "He is the person who taught me that careful attention is not the same as control. He is also the person who still thinks every problem can be solved with a spreadsheet." "That is an unfairly accurate introduction," I said. Mrs. Gable raised her sandwich bag in agreement. Tessa's fingers tightened around mine. "He is the man I chose to build a home with." She did not look at the people watching us for approval. She looked at me. The sentence carried no demand. It was simply true in public. Later that afternoon, we walked back to the house. The old boundary fence between our properties had been removed after the lease ended. In its place was a narrow path of flat stones leading from the sidewalk to our front porch. The cracked terracotta pot still sat by the door. Tessa had cleaned it, though one jagged line remained visible along the rim. Inside, she had planted rosemary. New green stems leaned toward the sun, brushing the chipped edge whenever the wind moved through them. Cooper stopped beside the path and looked toward the open gate. "He's thinking about it," Tessa said. "Let him learn the route." She glanced at me. "You track an animal by learning its habits, not by chasing it." "You remembered." "I remember everything that keeps me from making the same mistake twice." Cooper stepped onto the stones. He paused at the porch, sniffed the rosemary, and waited for Tessa. She did not pull the leash. She opened the front door. Cooper walked in first. Tessa followed, then turned back to hold the door for me. The terracotta pot caught the late sunlight beside her shoulder. Its crack was still there. So was the path. Neither needed to be hidden for the house to feel whole. Inside, coffee waited in the pot. Tessa had added raw sugar to my mug without asking. A pastry sat beneath a folded napkin. My camera bag rested beside her design case, both of them on the same bench by the door. She took the first step toward the kitchen, then looked back. "Are you coming?" "I'm learning the route." She smiled and left the door open behind her. Healthy love is not built by taking over someone's crisis or asking them to surrender their choices. It grows through clear records, kept promises, practical care, and the freedom to choose the next step together. A real green flag is someone who helps clear the path without deciding where you must go. Grant supported Tessa, respected her boundaries, and made sure her voice remained part of every important decision. Please like and subscribe so we can share more stories like this. Would you have stayed to clear the record, or would you have walked away from the room?